Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Am I audible behind? Hare Krishna. Okay. Hare Krishna. So thank Devakinandan Prabhu for his kind introduction and for his invitation here. So let us begin with some prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Punityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, I'll be speaking on this topic today of God proposes, man disposes. So this is what in English called as a chiasmus, when a normal saying is inverted. So the normal saying is man proposes, God disposes. Now we see this, that when Krishna in the Mahabharata goes to Duryodhana to seek peace, to avoid the fratricidal Kurukshetra war, at that time Krishna goes with a proposal and Duryodhana rejects the proposal. So this raises a question, if God is supreme, if God is all-powerful, then how can God be rebuffed? Can a human being go against God's will? So this brings us to a philosophical point which I'll discuss in terms of an acronym. So the word God, especially when how God relates with us human beings who also act according to our will. I'll talk in three terms, G-O-D. So God grants independence, offers counsel, and delivers consequence. So G-O-D. God grants independence, offers counsel, and delivers consequence. So the first point is that we all have various needs in life. Now we have need for food, clothing, shelter. More fundamentally need water, air. Now there are sometimes things that are necessary, but they are not sufficient. In mathematics, often this is something which is used for mathematical reasoning. Something may be necessary, but it is not sufficient. So, material things are our needs, food, clothing, shelter, but they are not all that we need. So, people can have various material things, and still, people can be depressed, people can be lonely, people can even commit suicide. So it is sometimes that people, because they don't have their basic necessities, they may get frustrated. But quite often, people who commit suicide, they have their other needs taken, basic body needs taken care of. So below or more fundamental to our need for the body's care is our need to love and be loved. Love is a fundamental need of the human heart. And as long as that need is not fulfilled, no matter what else we have, we will not be satisfied. In fact, most of the movies and novels usually talk about this longing for love. And they depict its fulfillment in various ways in romantic relationships. So, the Bhagavad Gita explains, in a broad philosophical terms, that we have two kinds of relationships. One is a vertical relationship with God, and the other is horizontal relationship with others. And our longing for love can be truly fulfilled only in our vertical relationship with God. Because God alone is eternal, God alone is perfect, God alone is the person who can reciprocate fully with our longing for love. Now, when we try to find in a horizontal relationship what is to be found only in the vertical relationship, that means when we try to find the love which is available in a loving relationship with Krishna, when we try to seek that in a loving relationship with someone else, it may be our spouse, it may be our child, it may be our parent, whoever else, it is not that person's problem, it is just that no one can act as a substitute for God. Yes, sometimes some people maybe have more difficult personalities, more difficult natures, so relating them will be more difficult. With some people we may have greater degrees of compatibility, so the relationship will be more close and thick. But still, whatever be the dynamics of any particular horizontal relationship, no horizontal relationship can substitute for the vertical relationship. So we are meant to have an eternal relationship with God. And the ideal human situation is that in which our horizontal relationships and our vertical relationship is symbiotic. That means that normally whatever we do, people will disappoint us. And if we are honest, we will also admit that we will disappoint people. Now, we are all imperfect. So, if we have shelter in the vertical relationship, then whatever jolts we may get in the horizontal relationship, we will be able to tolerate them. When we don't have the shelter of the vertical relationship, any jolt that we may get in a horizontal relationship, that we may find even devastating. So the vertical relationship brings stability to our horizontal relationship. We can go through weather the ups and downs. And similarly, if our horizontal relationship is also with those who are also striving to be devoted to God, then their association, their example, that inspires us to deepen our vertical relationship also. So this is the symbiotic and the best situation in our relationships. Now, any relationship, for it to be meaningful, there has to be voluntary reciprocation of love. If a man puts a gun at the head of a girl and tells her, "Love me or I'll kill you," now that is not love. Even if she says, "I love you," that's not love. So if the free will is taken away, then there cannot be a meaningful relationship. Or nowadays we have robots which can do many things. So if we make a robo which says in a very sweet female voice, "I love you," now, no matter how hungry a man is for a woman's love, that relationship is not going to satisfy. Because the robot is simply acting according to a program. So if there is no free will, or if free will is taken away, then there can be no meaningful loving relationship. So the same applies to our relationship with God. Although God is omnipotent, God is all-powerful, He wants He wants loving relationships with all of us. And for the sake of loving relationships, He gives us free will. So Krishna, He gives us free will because that is the only way we can have any kind of loving relationship with anyone, with others, or for that matter, with Him. So it is now, God is all powerful, and by His omnipotent will, He chooses to give us free will. So it is not that our free will is against or outside the omnipotence of God. Our free will is within God's omnipotence because God grants it. Yatha akashasthito nityam vayu sarvatra go mahan tatha sarvani bhutani matsthani ityupadharaya. So in Bhagavad Gita 9 chapter 6th verse, Krishna states that Yatha akashasthito nityam vayu, just as the wind is always situated in the sky. Now what this means is the wind can move. The wind can move left, right, up, down. But still, the wind is situated in the sky. If we envision the sky to be like an upside down bowl, then the sky doesn't limit the motion of the air, the motion of the wind. The sky still limits the scope of the motion of the wind. The scope means within what range the wind will move, that will be determined by the sky. The motion is not controlled, but the scope is controlled. So similarly, we all have free will. But the magnitude of our free will is determined by the Lord. So, for example, we cannot fly in the sky the way birds can fly. So, although we have free will, there is limitation to the free will. That we don't have unlimited free will. So God, by His arrangement, gives certain scope for our free will. And what determines the scope? That is determined by our past use of free will. So just as a father, as a parents, may give some pocket money to their children. Now actually the parents would like to give, they are planning that their whole inheritance is for their children. But they want to see how responsible the children are. The children are squandering the money, the parents will not give the money. Similarly, God gives us free will, and depending on how we use the free will, the extent of the free will that we get increases or decreases. So, for example, an ant, it can move only small, it is such a small size and can move slowly over small distances. Whereas an elephant has a huge body and can crush things under its feet. So a similar soul is there in an elephant's body, and a similar soul is there in an ant's body. Da bhuta prathak bhavam ekastham anupashyati. So Krishna says that the wise person sees, in 13th chapter, 31st, 32nd verse, he says that the wise person sees that in all living beings, there is similar spiritual nature, the same soul, and their bodies are different. So now, the soul in an ant's body, by one's past karma, is given a smaller scope. This in Sanskrit is called as kshetra. The 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is called as kshetra, kshetragya, vibhaga yoga. That kshetra and kshetragya. So the area over which we have free will, that is called our kshetra. So for example, I have free will. I have control over my body. So I can move my hand up, I can move my hand down. And suppose tomorrow I get paralysis. My hand will be here, I'll be here, but that will no longer be in my kshetra. So what is our kshetra that can change even within this life? And of course, it changes from one life to the next life. So God grants us free will. Similarly, if we look at the Mahabharata setting, now Krishna gives free will to everyone, including Duryodhana. So, by Krishna's arrangement, Duryodhana has taken birth in the royal family. He is the son of Dhritarashtra. And he has the opportunity to rule half the kingdom. But depending on how one uses the free will, future things will happen. So now, so the G is God grants free will. And then O is God offers counsel. So a few months ago I was in Australia, in Melbourne. So I was giving a class. After that, one person asked the question, why is it that in this world there are always the wrong options are so many? The temptations are so many and the right actions are so few. So isn't it unfair that if God had wanted us to do the right thing, He should not have given so many wrong options? So I explained that actually the wrong options are always more than the right option in any multiple choice exam. So in a multiple choice exam, we'll have usually 5 options are there. 4 are wrong. And a student could, well, sue the teacher. The student could say, teacher, you gave 4 wrong options. Therefore, you made the probability of my getting the answer right only 20%. And 20% is fail. So therefore, you are responsible for my failure. Now, what's wrong with this logic? The teacher doesn't leave making the right choice on mere chance or probability. The teacher gives education. And after giving education, if the student makes the wrong choice, that means the student has not studied. So similarly, Krishna gives us free will and then he offers us counsel how to use the free will. So there are multiple options in this world because the options that are there in this world reflect our desires. So the more our desires are independent of God, accordingly more options manifest in the world for us to act. So Krishna gives us knowledge in scripture. So now some people ask, okay, how do you know that Bhagavad Gita is the word of God? So yes, we were not there 5,000 years ago when we saw Krishna speaking. Now, of course, somebody is skeptical, they can ask, how do I know Krishna is God? You can go back and ask, how do we know God at all exists? So we can go back and back in these questions. But let's try to understand this first in terms of principles. The principle is, we see that in this world, our fundamental needs are provided for. We are born in this world, we need heat, light, air, water, food. These are already provided for in nature. Now we may have to work to earn food, earn money to get food. But our effort in earning to procure food is secondary. God's provision of food through nature is primary. Now, if God had not provided food through nature, then no matter how much hard we worked, we would not be able to have food. Now, even with all our advances in biotechnology and agricultural science, what we can do is we have food processing units. We have no food producing units. Food production is still done by nature. We can modify it, play around with it, but ultimately we depend on nature, and nature manifests God's benevolence. So every morning when the birds wake up and they start chirping, choo, 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 and they start looking, where is food, where is food? Now the birds may have to work hard to find grains, but their effort is secondary. The grains are already there, they just search for it. So if the grains had not been provided already, no matter how much they searched, they would not get the grains. So we may not just literally fly around searching for grains. We have whole industry and government and jobs and employment. So there is a system by which our needs get provided. But still within that system, God's provision is primary. Our endeavor is secondary. So God has provided for our needs. basic needs. Now, one of the fundamental needs for living is knowledge. Suppose a friend gave you on your birthday a gift, a very complicated looking new gadget. Now, on seeing it itself, you can understand this must be a very expensive gadget. But that friend gave you no manual with the gadget and gave you no information about using that gadget. And that gadget is such that even if you search on Google, you can't find anything about that gadget. Now, then the friend's effort in giving that gadget becomes useless. If a friend loves us, has some affection for us, and the friend has gone to the effort of giving us that gadget, then that friend will also make some provision for giving us knowledge about how to use that gadget. So similarly, if we see in this world, we have our basic necessities provided for. We could see the world itself is like a gadget which provides for our necessities. Further, our body is also like a complicated gadget. The more medical science advances, at one level, we get more and more treatments and more ways of curing disease or prolonging life. But at another level, we also realize more and more how complex the body is. So, sometimes when a person is very critically sick, then artificial oxygen is given to keep the person alive. Or if a person's kidney is not working, then some dialysis is done. Heart is not working, pacemaker is used. So researchers try to find out, if none of the bodily systems worked, and if we had to artificially run all the systems in the body. First of all, it's not even possible right now. The brain stops working, there is no way to make the brain work artificially. But whatever we know, making any bodily system work artificially is expensive. And if the whole body is to be made to work artificially, estimates vary depending on the level of machinery used. To maintain a person, with whatever bodily systems we can maintain, even for one day, would cost between 20 lakh to 50 lakh rupees. I don't know how much it is in dollars. So it's a significant amount. Now we are not doing it. So the point I'm making is that all our needs are provided for, and the body is also functioning. It's a complex device. So if God is making this body, we are not making the body function. Normally, when we eat food, nowadays many people have digestive problems. Just as when heart stops working, we have some pacemaker to help the heart function. So researchers thought, if people have digestive problems, can we put a digesting machine in the stomach so that people can digest food? Then they found scientists found digestion is such a complicated phenomena that we won't need a machine, we'll need a factory. And not just a factory, a chain of factories. A chain of factories which, even with nanotechnology, would run several meters, hundreds of meters long. So they say that actually, if we consider scientifically, the work is force into displacement. W is equal to F into S. So the amount of work after we eat food, and then the food goes into the alimentary canal, the amount of work that is done, there is just the vertical motion down, but there is also a peristalsis and diastalsis. There is a contraction and expansion. So all this causes displacement of the food. So the amount of work that is done in digesting one morsel of food is often more than the amount of work that an average modern human being performs throughout the day. So all that work is happening automatically. Now, automatically simply means we don't know how it is happening. Isn't it? Or if you say, oh, this toy runs automatically. This computer, this GPS automatically tells me where to go. Now, there is nothing automatic. Automatic simply means we don't have to bother about how the mechanism works. But there is a mechanism and someone has set up the mechanism. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 14th chapter, 15th verse, Krishna says, aham vaishvanaro bhutva praninam deham ashritaha pranapana samayukta pachamyannam chaturvidham. Krishna says, I am the digestive fire and I digest the food in the stomach. So what it means is, it means in simple terms is that Krishna has set up the system by which digestion occurs. And most of the time we eat food and don't even think about digestion. The only time we think about digestion is when it doesn't work. So God gives and forgives, we get and forget. So God has provided us so much, but we get it and we forget it. So the point I'm driving through towards all this is that God has provided the body. God has provided. It's a complicated machine. We don't even know how complicated it is. The more science advances, the more we realize how complex it is, and it requires elaborate functioning. So, just as a friend, if he gave us a very complex and expensive machine, would also tell us what it is to be used for, would provide us a manual. Similarly, if God has provided us this complex bodily machine, would he not provide some direction about what we are meant to do in life? Would he not give knowledge about what life is meant for? So if God has provided food, clothing, shelter, air, water, then he will also provide for knowledge. Now in fact, we all intuitively recognize that this search for knowledge, the whole process of science has advanced because of the human search for knowledge. Now, before Newton saw a fruit falling, now before him, millions had seen fruits falling. Most of them just picked up the fruit and ate it. Newton thought, why did this fruit fall? Now, that he, in answer to that question, came up with the theory of gravity is his brilliance. At the same time, his very question, why did this fruit fall? How did this fruit fall? Indicates an assumption that things are not just disorderly. There is some order in the way things happen in the nature, and we can find out that order. So science is a search for order, and it is a search for order that brings meaning to our life. So, just as we search for knowledge in one direction through scientific field, so science actually searches for material knowledge of material phenomena. Science doesn't discuss spiritual subject matters. So, spiritual is not contradictory to science. The spiritual and the scientific are complementary. Just like, say, I came just now. I was in New York in the afternoon. I gave a class there. I came from New York to here. So now, if somebody was observing the car in which I came, so people may say that, okay, why did this car move? Okay, we may start from a material explanation. Okay, the car moved because the wheel started moving. Okay, why did the wheel start moving? Oh, because there is a mechanism, there's an axle, and it gets connected with the piston, and when the piston moves, the wheels move. Okay, but why does the piston move? Oh, because there was a spark in the ignition, and that causes the fuel to combust, and that's why the piston started moving, the car started moving because of that. Okay, but why was there a spark in the ignition? Oh, there was a key that was in the vertical position, the key moved to the horizontal position. So therefore, now why did the car move? Because the key moved from the vertical to the horizontal position. Is it a correct explanation? Yes, it is a correct explanation, but it is not a complete explanation. That is true, but at a more fundamental level if I go, the car moved because I wanted to come here. Because somebody was driving me here and that person moved the ignition. So science goes back and looks for explanations, but it stops at the material level. It does not go beyond material to the spiritual. So the same search for knowledge, which when directed in this realm of science gives us scientific knowledge. When that same search of knowledge is pushed further towards ultimate causes, that gives us spiritual knowledge. Albert Einstein said that the sciences, the arts, and the religions, they're all fruits of the same tree of the human quest for knowledge. So, God, just as we seek knowledge, and when seek knowledge means we try to find out some orderly patterns in how things happen in nature. So similarly, people look for orderly patterns and they find it through scripture. So in principle, we understand that God will provide us knowledge for living in this world. Now, how can we know that the Bhagavad Gita is the word of God? We can, just like if I get some post and I get a device in it, and I get another post which has a book in it. Now, how do I know which this book is the manual for this? First thing is, we look at the manual and see whether it helps us to make sense of the device. And second is, if I operate according to the manual, does it help me to use the device better? So similarly, we can study the Bhagavad Gita and then see if it helps us to make better sense of life. If it helps us to understand the world, to understand our purpose and our place in this world. And then secondly, we can see that if I mold my life according to Gita, does that make my life better? Does that help improve the stability, the satisfaction, the peace in my life? Does it make me happier? And millions of people the world over have experienced this. So the Bhagavad Gita, through Bhagavad Gita, God offers counsel. We're talking about G-O-D, O is counsel. So I was establishing the rational foundation for the point that God in principle will offer counsel to us, just like a teacher will give education about the various options to help the student make the right choice. And now, after giving counsel through scripture, then if you see the Bhagavad Gita is in the Bible there are 10 commandments, and they are good ethical principles for helping people to live morally. The Bhagavad Gita is not so much a book of commandments as a book of choices and consequences. In the Bhagavad Gita, the vision of God is not of someone high up in the sky, casting the sinful down to hell. The Bhagavad Gita's vision of God is of a guide by the side. God is a guide by the side. Krishna is right next to Arjuna on the chariot in the battle of Kurukshetra. And similarly, Sarvasya chaham hridhi sannivishto. In 15.15 in the Bhagavad Gita, he says that he is there in the hearts of all living beings. So God is a guide by the side. And he does not give so much commandments as choices. So if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, this will happen. And now it's up to you to choose. So by the time Krishna completes speaking the Bhagavad Gita, in 18.63, iti guhyatam iti te jnanam akhyātam guhyāt guhyataram maya vimrishaita dasheshena yathechasi tatha kuru. He says that now I have spoken, deliberate and then decide what you are going to do. So Krishna gives free will and then offers choices. Prior to this is 18.63. In 18.58, he has said, he's given the broad choice. Machittah sarva durgani mat prasadat tarishyasi athache tvam ahankaran nashroshyasi vinangshasi. He says, Machittah, if you become conscious of me, if you act according to my guidance, you will pass over all obstacles by my grace. If, however, you act out of false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. This is choices and consequences. So, when Krishna, he comes to Duryodhana, he offers Duryodhana choices. In fact, he tells, see actually, and when there are negotiations, now negotiations is often a big art. When the two people meet and they try to thrash out an agreement. So traditionally, in the Indian knowledge systems, there are 4 main tools for negotiation or for settling of some difference. That is, Sam, Dam, Bhed and Danda. So Krishna actually employs all of them. It's a very persuasive case he makes. So Sam, he says, oh, ultimately all of you are the same family, the same Kuru dynasty. Why should members of the same dynasty fight? And he knows Duryodhana is not going to listen, so he appeals to Dhritarashtra. At least you are like the patriarch of the family. So he appeals to him. Dhritarashtra says, "Oh Krishna, whatever you say makes perfect sense to me. But my foolish son Duryodhana doesn't listen. Please persuade him." So Krishna looks at the Kuru elders and he says, "Just see, the king is saying that he has no power." Then he turns to Duryodhana and he starts speaking to Duryodhana. And then when Duryodhana is just not ready to listen, so he offers dam. He says that just give 5 kingdoms, five villages. So 5 villages. Now this is a drastic concession and negotiation. Just give 5 villages. Duryodhana is still not ready to listen. Then Krishna does danda. He says, "Oh Duryodhana, you are so arrogant, thinking that you will be easily able to defeat the Pandavas. But don't you remember what the Pandavas have? Just one Pandava, Arjuna, defeated all of your warriors together at Virat. Is your memory so short that you have forgotten it already?" And he talks about all the demons whom Bhima has killed. It is how Arjuna has in this very body ascended to heaven and has defeated demons which even the gods could not defeat. The Nivat Kavachas were the demons whom even Indra could not defeat. But Arjuna had defeated them. And like that, he threatens, he says, if you fight against the Pandavas, your whole dynasty will be destroyed. You will not live. And still Duryodhana remains adamant. Then Krishna decides to do Bheda. And he starts saying that, now this is a whole elaborate chapter in the Mahabharata. I'm just going very briefly over here. Then he says, he sees Duryodhana not listening, he turns to the other Kauravas. And he says, if any of you have any intelligence, no, you should stop the destruction of the Kuru dynasty. And therefore, if Duryodhana does not listen to the peace proposal which I have brought, then you should have Duryodhana arrested, imprisoned and sidelined. And you should agree to my peace proposal. Now Krishna's presentation is so persuasive that Dushasan is won over. And Dushasana actually says, if Duryodhana does not agree to you, Krishna, then I will personally tie him up and put him in jail. Now when Duryodhana hears this, his mouth falls open in anger. And now he just looks here and there, he just walks out. And he walks out, now the remaining 98 brothers are caught. Duryodhana or Dushasana. Duryodhana or Dushasana. One by one, all of them follow Duryodhana. And then, fine, Dushasana is left all alone. He doesn't know what to do. He also follows. Now Duryodhana, he was evil, but still he was clever. He was cunning. So now he doesn't want to alienate Dushasana. Dushasana is one of his primary aides. So he uses his cunning. He says, as soon as Dushasana comes in, see, we had discussed earlier that Krishna is very cunning. And his speech is so deceptive that he can deceive anyone. Just see Dushasana, how he had deceived you, isn't it? Now, Dushasana, he's thinking, I went against my brother. What will my brother say now? What should I do? Oh, yes, Krishna, we should not listen to him. He's very deceptive. So Duryodhana knows how to emotionally manipulate people and to get him to his side. So actually, there's a whole, how he emotionally manipulated Karna is the defining tragedy of Karna's life. Karna is an excellent example of how a virtuous person ends up becoming vicious because of bad association. He's a manipulator. So, anyway, the point which I am making here is that Krishna offers all possible counsel. And finally, Dhritarashtra summons Duryodhana back. And then he calls his wife Gandhari and tells, you offer some counsel to Duryodhana. And Gandhari offers counsel and still Duryodhana does not listen. And then finally Krishna comes back. He says, now I'm making the final proposal. He says, just give 5 villages. And Duryodhana replies that I will not give even as much land as is required to put the tip of a needle through. See, this as a dialogue it sounds very impressive. But what does it mean? Any time if somebody asks us something and we have to say no to that person, saying no generally displeases the other person. And that's why there is a whole art of saying no. You can try to say no in a way which minimizes the displeasure or the hurt of the other person. But here, Duryodhana says no in a way that is meant to maximize the hurt. It is basically what he is saying is, I will not concede even a little bit. And in this way, he thoroughly dishonors and disrespects Krishna. First of all, Krishna's going as a peace messenger itself is a radical proposal. Because, say, India, Pakistan, there are always some border conflicts that keep happening. And then India may have his defense secretary going to Pakistan for peace negotiations, or Pakistan's defense secretary may come. Now, it's practically unheard of that the Prime Minister of India will go to Pakistan for peace negotiations. Oh, Krishna's going is like that. The king of all kings, he's himself going as a peace negotiator. And when he is going, Duryodhana just bluntly rejects him. It's a terrible dishonor. On top of that, according to any civilized code of conduct, a messenger is to be treated honorably. Even Ravana, who is vicious, and even when Hanuman has destroyed his Ashok Vatika, still when Vibhishan Ravana is so angry, that is his favorite garden, Ashok Vatika, and in the fight that happens, Hanuman destroys the whole Ashok Vatika. So that Ashok Vatika for Ravana now becomes Shoka Vatika. He's distressed by that. He's distressed. And he's so angry when Hanuman is captured. He says, kill him. And then Vibhishan says, no, a messenger cannot be harmed. Cannot kill a messenger. So even a person as vicious as Ravana agrees, yes, we cannot kill a messenger. We cannot harm a messenger. That is against all codes of diplomatic conduct. And yet, what does Duryodhana try to do? He tries to arrest Krishna. It's just, even the concept of arresting Krishna, thought of arresting Krishna, is a gross violation of all diplomatic protocol. Of course, he doesn't succeed, but still his intent itself indicates the level of his maliciousness. And after that, or rather before that, when Krishna has come to Hastinapur, at that time he stays in the house of Vidura. And Vidura asks Krishna, Krishna, why have you come here? You know that Duryodhana is not going to listen. Now Vidura has this nightmare that in the same assembly, Draupadi had been dishonored. And he had tried vehemently to stop that dishonor, but he had failed. And he's thinking that Krishna may also be similarly dishonored in that assembly tomorrow. And he cannot tolerate that thought. So, imagine the Prime Minister of India goes for peace negotiations to Pakistan, and Pakistan arrests the Indian Prime Minister. No, it would be a total assault on the dignity of the country. Grievous assault. So, even if they don't succeed, still their very attempt, to put the handcuff on a Prime Minister, it's a grievous insult. So, Vidura cannot tolerate this thought. He says, Krishna, why do you come for peace negotiation? So, Krishna tells Vidura at that time, Vidura, what you are saying is right. I know that Duryodhana is not going to listen. But I have come here for only one purpose. That is to demonstrate to the world that my devotees did everything possible to avoid war, to avoid bloodshed. Normally we say, we have done everything humanly possible. Now here, the Pandavas did not only everything humanly possible, they did everything divinely possible also. Now everything that God himself came and tried. So Krishna, he, in one sense, anybody who goes for a peace negotiation and doesn't succeed, goes as a messenger and doesn't succeed, that is a failure. There's a loss of faith in that. But Krishna knows that there will be loss of faith and still accepts that. Why? Because of his love for his devotees. To ensure that Duryodhana, that the Pandavas never get blamed for having instigated violence. And time again, it is not just Krishna who gives counsel to Duryodhana. Bhishma, Vidura, Drona, Parshuram, Maitreya, all great sages come and give counsel. but he never listens to anyone. And then lastly, the God. So God offers counsel. So to such an extent God goes to give counsel. And for all of us also, Krishna gives counsel to the Bhagavad Gita. And he sends his devotees out, to distribute the books, to share the message, by which we can all have the knowledge, by which we can make right choices. Now some of us, or very few of us actually, were seekers of God, who went out in search for God. For most of us, it is devotees who came out in search for us, gave us some books. So this is God's mercy coming to us through his devotees. So last D is delivers consequences. So Radha Shyam Sundar Bhagwan ki jai. So Krishna delivers consequences means that once we choose an action, that reaction will come. It's like we have choice whether to jump from a 10-story building or not. But if we jump from a 10-story building, then we can't change. Then gravity will take over. And we can't break God's laws. We can only break ourselves against God's laws. So once an action is chosen, the consequence, the reaction will come. Now Krishna, sometimes people say that the Pandavas also fought unethically in the Kurukshetra war. Yes, whether Pandavas fought unethically or ethically, that is a question. It's a deep question. I'll answer it briefly over here. That the Pandavas are clearly virtuous. Time and time again, they try to resolve things by peaceful means. And time again, the Kauravas exploit them, abuse them. And the Pandavas are ready to forgive. Even when Bhima is poisoned, Yudhishthira says, it doesn't matter. We'll tolerate it. Even when the Pandavas are attempted to burn alive, the Pandavas take a low profile and they just go away. But even when the Pandavas are dispossessed in the gambling match, they are made to lose their kingdom, they are made to lose everything. And it's a completely unfair gambling match. Now suppose, say, India and Zimbabwe are having a cricket match. And when India goes to Zimbabwe to play, suddenly the Zimbabwe country brings the South African or the Australian cricket team over there to play. If you are playing Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe's team has to play. You can't have Australia's team playing over there. So the gambling match was between Yudhishthir and Duryodhana. So if Yudhishthir is throwing the dice on one side, Duryodhana should be throwing the dice on the other side. When he is putting Shakuni, at that time itself, he is cheating. He cannot have Shakuni playing over there. The whole gambling match was rigged. And even when everything was lost in the gambling match, still the Pandavas did not take any resolve to retaliate. But when Draupadi was dishonored, then that line was crossed. And then all the 5 Pandava brothers actually took vows. Arjuna said, I'll kill Karna. Bhima said, I will break the thigh of Duryodhana. I'll kill Dushasana. So the point is that the Pandavas were time and time virtuous and the Kauravas were time and time vicious. So eventually when the war took place, Krishna could have arranged for the Pandavas to have won entirely by honorable means. Now I have written an article on my website where elaborately this question about whether Krishna was unfair to Karna or not. Krishna and Arjuna were unfair to Karna. All the issues are answered. But I'll focus here on Duryodhana. So morality is not categorical. It is contextual. Categorical means this is the category of right, this is the category of wrong. So some people think this is right, this is wrong. So speaking lies is wrong, speaking truth is right. Yes, at one level it is true. But suppose some riots are going on and some person is being attacked by some rioters and that person comes to our house. That person is, say, our friend or relative. And he comes in our house and hides in our house. And the rioters come and knock at our house. Is he there in your house? Now should we speak the truth? Actually, being truthful will be being violent. Being truthful is the wrong thing over there. So normally, truthfulness is a good thing. But in this case, being truthful will be a bad thing. So, right and wrong is not just categorical, that being truthful is right, speaking a lie is false. The right and wrong, morality is contextual. What may be right in one situation can be wrong in another situation. So, the Pandavas, when they're when they're fighting against the Kauravas, the Pandavas, Dushasan first says, not Dushasan, Bhishma is the commander on one side, Drishtadyumna is the commander on the other side. So they meet, and at that time the Kauravas say that remember the codes of war and do not violate those codes. Now at that time Drishtadyumna and Arjuna, they start thinking, why are the Pandavas talking, why the Kauravas talking about the codes of war? They have violated so many times their things. So Drishtadyumna says, we will not be the first to violate the codes of war. But if you violate, then we will not hold ourselves back. And the Kauravas violate the codes time and time again. Most importantly, in the slaughter of Abhimanyu. And then again that line is crossed. Now finally, when the last battle takes place between Duryodhana and Bhima, at that time, that morning, Gandhari, or the previous evening, Gandhari, she through her vision empowers Bhima. Sorry, not Bhima, Duryodhana. And that no matter wherever he is hit, he will not be hurt, only alone wounded or killed. So now Krishna of course arranged in such a way that his thigh is covered at that time. So now when the fight starts, Bhima and Duryodhana both are very strong mace fighters. Bhima has greater strength, Duryodhana has greater skill. In that sense they are compensated for. But suppose now Bhima is fighting and he fights the best fight of his life. And several times he knocks Duryodhana down. Some of the blows that Bhima hits in Duryodhana, they could have ripped apart a small hill. And Duryodhana is flown far away by the force of the hit. But still when he falls, he is completely unhurt. And he laughs. And then he comes and hits Bhima. And he is also skillful, and slowly Bhima finds his strength is eroding. Now to understand how this match, this has been rigged now by Gandhari's vow. It's like, what is it? Say a bowler is bowling. There's a champion bowler and a champion batsman. Now, suppose the rules of umpiring are changed in such a way that no matter if the bowler bowls and clean bowls the batsman, still the batsman is not out. That even if the bowler traps the batsman leg before, still not out. Even if the bowler has the batsman caught, still not out. No matter what you do, the bowler can never make the batsman out. And on the other side, the batsman is hitting the bowler whenever the opportunity comes, and the bowler is getting exhausted. What can the bowler do? The match is rigged over there. So the only thing the bowler can do in such a time is, bowl body line, make the batsman retired hurt. So Bhima has no option over there. Now Bhima, he tries every single option over there. And still Gandhari's power has rigged the match unfairly. And that's why now Duryodhana has done so many sinful things in the past, and eventually he has to be punished. And Krishna tells him, hit him on the thighs. And Bhima notices, and Bhima hits him on the thighs. And that one blow on the thigh is enough to finish the match. And then Duryodhana gets very angry. He says, oh, you Keshava, I saw that you pointed it out to Bhima to hit me here. He says, you are always unrighteous, you are always vicious. And why are you gloating in victory? You won unfairly. And the whole world will condemn you for your unfairness. So Krishna replies, oh Duryodhana, now it is that you remember what is fair? What happened? Was it fair when you had Draupadi disrobed? Was it fair when you and your evil ones, they called Draupadi prostitute? Was it fair when you tried to burn the Pandavas? Was it fair when 6 of you came together and killed Abhimanyu? Was it fair when you tried to poison the unsuspecting Bhima? Krishna lists all the times when Duryodhana has acted viciously. And Krishna says, if You were fair at that time, Bhima has killed you by that very fairness. By that very fairness. So Krishna, here he demonstrates the principle called as Shatho Shatyam. There are, as I said, that morality is contextual. There are three kinds of morality. In Sanskrit it is called as Brahaspati Niti, Shukra Niti and Kanaka Niti. So Brahaspati Niti is always act right, no matter how the opposite person acts. So Shukra Niti is that if the opposite person is acting right, you act right. But if the opposite person is vicious, then you have to pay back in the same coin. And Kanaka Niti is what? No matter how the other person acts, just act viciously for your purpose. So, Duryodhana actually uses this Kanaka Niti. So, Krishna tells that Shukraniti is the best and the Pandavas, no, not Shukraniti, Brahaspati Niti is the best. But when that doesn't work, Krishna says don't hesitate. So, what Krishna does is God delivers consequences. So, the human being can defy the will of God for some time. But in due course, consequences will come. And that means that when sometimes in our life suffering comes, now even when we are devotees practicing, the Pandavas are practicing, they are serious devotees. They are more serious devotees than any of us. And still so much suffering comes in their life. And yes, they are distressed. But the Pandavas never blame Krishna. They understand that, yes, this Duryodhana is evil and he is causing the suffering. And similarly in our life, sometimes suffering can come from various sources. A devotee doesn't blame Krishna. A devotee recognizes that Krishna has given everyone free will and people can misuse their free will. Rather than when we get any suffering from a horizontal source, then rather than blaming Krishna, we need to take shelter of Krishna more. Absorb ourselves in Krishna. By that, we will get shelter, we will get relief. And then we will be able to find out how best to deal with that horizontal suffering. So, the conclusion of this whole discussion is that in due course of time, everybody will get consequences. And as devotees, sometimes even devotees may have to suffer in this world. That is just the nature of this world. But if we stay devoted to Krishna,